truthfully, in my opinion, there's a lot of like fluff out there, and there's a lot of like telling you what to do, but not really showing you how to do it. And I think we've kind of reversed that a little bit, in the sense that like we do this, like for example, we do this thing called a hot seat, where basically I'm a founder. I have an issue with like acquiring customers, right? So then you'll sit down with like the panel or the investor panel, the founder panel, or just one of the speakers, and basically you walk through.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, Christian D. Evans. And guys, we have someone very special on today. And the reason why is because he's young, he's vibrant, he's energetic, and boy, he's accomplishing a lot. And the reason why I want to have him on is because he's been there, done that, and produced incredible amount of results, but also always producing even more so. And to be this young and being able to accomplish what he's been able to accomplish, I wanted to have him on because we can really dive in and say, what are the behaviors? What are the patterns? What are you doing differently? How were you raised? What's your story, man? And what's going on in your life? And so we're going to be diving into some really, really cool subjects. He is the serial entrepreneur, startup advisor, and philanthropist. He is the CMO, director of events, and host for Kamp, the go-to startup experience for an early stage founders looking to launch or scale their startup. He's also founded the Single Parent Family Foundation, which provides family support programs and resources to single parent families in Dallas County who are living at the federal poverty level. He is also a venture partner and FI Dallas Chapter Accelerator Director for Founder Institute Texas. He's also the co-founder of Javannah Capital International and Sports Media Promotions, which is the parent company behind the Dallas Cowboys player talk show Inside the Huddle. We also serves as the executive producer and so much more. Please welcome my friend, Javy Martinez. How are you doing, my man?
Good, man. Wow, that was long. I've never really like read it out myself, so I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm doing well. Appreciate you having me on. Hope everyone's staying safe and healthy.
Well, man, I really look forward to this because obviously, like I said, you're young, you're vibrant, but also you've accomplished a lot in your time frame here, and we really want to kind of dive into it. But I do know, before we kind of dive into the business world, you did come up in a pretty rough situation, and I'd love to dive into that and just kind of let you kind of give us a little bit of context, how you were raised, and the reason why you have such a heart for people that are in the poverty level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was born and raised in a different country. I lived in Cuba, Mexico till I was 11 before I came over to the States. From an early age, I kind of was like, I guess like, I don't know what if spoiled is the right word, but spoiled by both my parents who were entrepreneurs. So I got into the, I guess, so-called game early. I've always just had like that business mind, but growing up in a third world country, then a second world country, and now living in like the world's greatest country of America, you learn a lot of things, and the one thing that was instilled into me was that I literally have nothing to complain about in life. With that, from a young age, I was always dealing with adversity, and probably the hardest thing that's ever happened to me was when I just turned 15 years old and my father passed away, unfortunately. And, losing a family member is tough on anyone, right? But losing like a parent, that's just like a completely different, just kind of like loss. So obviously, that's something that I'm still learning how to embrace today. Growing up without a father figure was like really tough. I just had a daughter myself. So like, she's about to be, further than I was, with a dad. So, when I was 15, I had to help my mom take over his business. My mom's kind of been running it since. She does more of the day-to-day, but that's kind of what got me really excited about entrepreneurship and just kind of doing my own thing. So since I was 15, I was running my dad's real estate business in Mexico, and that's kind of what put me through college, put my sister through college, and gave my mom pretty much a full-time job. Even though my mom has her own business, she's had a daycare herself for the last 15 years. So I feel like entrepreneurship and just like doing your own thing, it kind of runs in the family. But overall, though, I still remember, I like to tell this story just because, like, back in the early 2000s, like it was just completely different, like lifestyle and just lives we were living and just society in general. I remember my first day. I was fortunate enough in Mexico to go to an English speaking school, and that's how I learned how to speak English. So I'm fluent in English and Spanish, but I remember my first like day of school in Chicago. That's where I was living at the time. I was in fourth grade, and we were out in recess playing kickball. And I remember I was just trying to figure out like how old someone was. And I didn't, obviously when you learn English and Spanish, like you learn them, it's backwards when you're trying to switch from one subject to the other or language to another. And I remember asking some kids, like, how many years are you? And like, I was just made fun of. And I said, like, that day today, like, it doesn't really haunt me, but it's just like one of those like learning curves where it's just like, like it's little things like that kind of mold you to who you are today. So, even though like my dad's not here, like I get to live through him with this business and continue his legacy. So that's a little bit about like some of the adversity that I've dealt with, throughout my life. And I mean, there's been many more, especially in the business world, that we'll probably get to. But as an immigrant, I think, and I feel like a lot of my friends who are immigrants can kind of resonate. I just feel like we have our chip on our shoulder, and overall, like I feel like there's just like, especially like Hispanic parents are very tough. So, I just feel like the expectation was always high at my household. And I have two very smart sisters that were straight A students, and I'm like maybe a C+ student, but somehow I graduated with 3 degrees. But overall, I think just all these things that happened in my life, I think happened for a reason and have molded me to who I am today.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that because I do find it very interesting. You got the wealthiest man in the world right now came from South Africa, right? And I do know just from talking to a lot of my friends that are, immigrants, they have a different respect for America than most Americans do. And the reason why is because they see the value that can be here because they experienced massive poverty. And so let me ask you this, just kind of dialing in, obviously, to being the man of the household, to taking on those responsibilities after your dad sadly passed away. What did that feel like, and what was that kind of pressure? Did you embrace that, or is that something that you had to work through and to make those kind of heavy decisions?
Yeah, no, I think, I think one thing that, I've learned as I've gotten older is that, and now that I'm a parent myself, I think one downfall of it was my mom's probably one of the hardest working people I've ever met, and I love her to death, but she's, the way that her just kind of like leadership and teaching style is just like it's just like her way per se. And where I'm trying to get with all this is like, she tried playing both mom and dad, which I think kind of jaded me a little bit. And I feel like I kid you not, I'm pretty sure I was grounded in like 98% of my like childhood, just because I was, not that I was a bad kid, but it was just like, parent, like especially Hispanic parents, just everything we did had to be a certain way, and I just like kind of a little rebel growing up. And, I was always someone, funny about someone that was like pushing the boundaries, right? And I feel like that's what I'm doing in business today, just continue to push the envelope on innovation, just pushing those boundaries to see how far I can go. I like to say that I'll bend the rules as far as possible. I just won't break them.
I love it. One of the things is this.
Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to say something that you mentioned earlier about like with Elon Musk and just, the immigrant story. I think a lot of people, so first off, I think we live in a bubble in the US. Like I think people don't realize like how lucky we all are. One thing to put it into perspective is like in Cuba, I just got married in Cuba in 2019, and the average salary in Havana is $25 a month. So like that's for like the 1%, which is like, doctors, lawyers. But they also get a lot of different things from the government. But still, like when you put that into perspective, like that's maybe like lunch for us, for most of us. So it's just like that, we're very lucky. But also to say that people that come to America think that America is the land of opportunities, which I think is true to an extent. I think it's the land of you create your own opportunities.
Wow. Well said, because at the end of the day, you still have to make a choice and you have to make the sacrifices necessary. And I appreciate you kind of dialing that, because one of the quotes that I've always heard is like, you have to always go out there and accomplish the thing that's necessary. Now, let me ask you this, okay? So you've been able to accomplish a lot. And like you said, you weren't like the most smart student out there, but you have 3 degrees. So let's talk a little bit about that journey, man. And how did you accomplish that?
Yeah, so I always hated. I like like you hear so like I literally like hated school. Like I was not a fan. Especially given that like at 15 I was pretty much running like a multi 6-figure business like for our family. So like I was just like I don't need school, but I also understood like the power of education. Given that none of my parents got the opportunity to go to college, and so I went into Texas Tech University, which is like West Texas, and I actually changed my degree like 7 times. I started in like PT, and like then I realized that I was gonna be like 8 years, and I was like, no way. So then I went over to like hospitality because I always wanted to own a restaurant because my dad owned a restaurant, and that didn't really work out. So then I moved over to the business school, and I finally kind of found my place. So I started as like international business. That was like my first degree technically. And as I was getting closer to graduation, I just finished studying abroad in London and Rome for the summer. And I was just like, well, what do you really do with like international business degree? Like it's a very broad degree. So then I sat with my counselor to talk to her, and she's like, well, actually, if you get like 12 more hours, you can actually get your marketing and management degree. So you can graduate with 3 degrees. And I was sold. I was like, all right, that is like, for me, my perspective behind it was like, that's such a selling point to any employer, like graduating, saying, hey, I just graduated with 3 degrees in 5 years, right? And, not trying to toot my own horn, but it was just like, it worked out very well because a lot of the classes crossed over. So I got very lucky too, in that respect. But overall, I mean, like, I kid you not, I don't think I ever got higher than like a C+ on any of my tests. Like, that's how bad of a student I was. And like, I talk about it because like, people think that you have to be like the smartest person or just have to be like a really good student to have your own business. I'm not going to lie. My perception and my perspective is that like most of those students end up being like the number 2s and the number 3s and 7s at companies, right? Because, I mean, as you know, like running your own business is not easy and it's not for everyone.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And so, because see, one of the things I always found very interesting is that, just like you said, a lot of people that are up in that top echelon, that just like that educational system is very simple and easy for them, then they tend to be the 3 and 4 and 5 people in the top tier of things. And sometimes even though below the 10 level, because I never went to college, and I'm glad I never did, and I learned a lot just from doing things. And so let me ask you this, because see, you have that tenacity. So you're the CMO of Kamp. So let's talk a little bit about Kamp and the power of what's going on in that industry, man.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm using my wife's computer because for some reason my computer the camera didn't want to work. But so as far as like, can you, I guess like in what, because I can go in different directions. So I'm trying to really like zone in on like what exactly like you're looking for as far as like an answer. Like, are you referring more like?
Well, what's the power? Like, what's the result? What's the benefit that are?
So as far as like as a founder or just like company wise or like how? Sorry.
As a software. Correct.
Oh, okay. So I mean, obviously technology is changing. I think I read this crazy statistic the other day. And it's like since the Industrial Revolution, I think like we've grown like faster in the last, I think it was like decade than we did in like the first 150 years of like our nation from a technology standpoint. So overall, I think I get very blessed to be able to meet a bunch of like startup founders, specifically technology based founders. So I hear some of these ideas and some are crazy. Some are like, I was like, man, I can definitely use that. And I'm someone that loves like testing and experimenting with different tools. Like that's my jam. Like when you ask me like what my hobbies are, I'm like trying a new software from AppSumo. So I think, it's changing so fast. And, one thing that I've really been kind of leaning in on a lot and trying to understand, because it's a completely different world, is like AI tools, just because like they're so, just like the power of like, for me, it's like having an AI tool is like working smarter, not harder. It's the best way I can put it. But yeah, I think like, I'm very curious to see what life looks like in the next 2 to 5, even, the next decade. I think we're going to, like we're gonna look back on this moment and be like, wow, like it's kind of like thinking like my grandma still uses a flip phone. I don't know why, but it's just like that's what we're gonna be thinking in like 5 or 10 years about like the tools and software that we're using today.
So and let's kind of, because you're exactly right, that baseline. And now that with COVID, everything's been pushed that way. So naturally, we have to kind of be, engaging that. But obviously, I know you guys are big into developing incredible amount of events. And I do know that you have an event coming up here shortly as well. So kind of explain like the massive kind of network and the community that you've been able to build there at Kamp.
Yeah. So, Kamp was founded by a gentleman named Phil Castro, and he's been doing this for about 3 years. I actually wanted to like do something similar, a little context and backstory so people can understand like what this is. Like I read an article about him on Medium one time, and I was just like, man, he's doing what I wanted to do here in Dallas, essentially. So like I DM'd him, got on a phone call, and basically like he told me everything that he was doing with Kamp, and I was like, that sounds amazing. Like I want to do that here in Dallas. And I knew it was going to be a lot of work, but then he really sold me on how much work it really is. So randomly, like a couple of days later, he like pinged me again. He's like, hey, can you get on a call on Friday? And I was like, sure. So long story short, basically, he's like, instead of you going to build your own thing, like, why don't you just join me and help me build mine? And then, we'll grow it together. And obviously for me, it's like, there's two ways of learning. It's either A, by doing it and failing, or B, learning from someone that has already done it and kind of take that expedited course. So that's what I decided to do, just because I was involved with multiple projects at the time, and I wouldn't have the bandwidth to do it on my own. So essentially what Kamp is, I like to say it's at the intersection of like education meets party meets like, networking is the best way I can put it. So it's an all day experience. And, since joining about 18 months ago, we've been to like 15 different cities. We'll be in Miami this weekend, Orange County in 2 weeks, and then Chicago and Atlanta. But the whole goal is that like when you think about like startups and like early stage founders, like there's not really a lot of places to go, like especially first time founders, where you like can go, how do you acquire customers? Like there's so many different things that involve, as an early stage startup or founder, like that you just don't know. And yeah, you can read articles, but it's a different feeling when you're able to be in a room with all people that are experiencing similar issues as you are, and can feel comfortable talking about it, right? Because it's like, I remember early on when I was working on some of my projects and building some of the companies that I've helped build, like it was a very lonely road. Like it was just like me, myself, and I. Is the best way that I can put it. So, what we've decided to do is create an all-day experience, which is like, it's like if a workshop and a conference and like a virtual event were to like have a baby, it'd be Kamp. Is the best way that I can put it. So like, we just do things very differently. Like in the morning, we'll do like EDM and coffee is like the networking, the founder networking. Then we'll do like old school hip hop, because we both love old school hip hop, and lunch. And then throughout the day, we'll have like different keynotes. So like in Miami, we're doing things a little bit different than most of the other events. So we have this series called Day Kamp. So essentially, this chapter that we just launched in Miami, every month we're having a different event based on a different topic. So in January, it was go-to-market strategies. So the speakers that we brought in talked about different go-to-market strategies. In February, it was like mission user acquisition. So it was just like, different strategies, tactics, stories. And the people that we bring in are either startup vets or, just industry leaders or, thought leaders in their space who have been there and done that. Because truthfully, in my opinion, there's a lot of like fluff out there. And, there's a lot of like telling you what to do, but not really showing you how to do it. And I think we've kind of reversed that a little bit in the sense that like, we do this, like, for example, we do this thing called a hot seat, where basically I'm a founder. I have an issue with like acquiring customers, right? So then you'll sit down with like the panel or the investor panel, the founder panel, or just one of the speakers, and basically you walk through your problem. And the whole goal is for you to understand maybe where you went wrong, or maybe look at opportunities that you weren't seeing. But not only that, the whole like room gets to kind of chime in, right? You'll get ideas from even other founders, be like, hey, well, I tried this. or, you know, maybe you should try this, X, Y, and Z. And it's like very collaborative. And I think like we've come in as a community, and I think that's like the community aspect behind Kamp is so strong. I mean, we have people everywhere. Every city we go to, a lot of people know who Kamp are, just because we've been there multiple times. But, you know, to kind of wrap this up, you know, we have different keynotes throughout the day, and then we end the day with a founder panel. So we'll bring like rock star founders. Like we brought in January, like the founder of Nova, which is a early stage bank in Florida. He just finished raising like a $90 million like Series A. It was phenomenal. Really interesting to learn from someone like that. And then we'll have an investor panel, and then we end it by having 5, you know, startups pitch, or 5 founders pitch their startup. And it's not like for a competition, but more for like practice, and letting like the VCs or the angel investors let you know, like, hey, this is what I look for in a pitch, right? And you're kind of getting into the minds of the investors and the psychology behind like how they look at investments. From there, we go to a 2-hour happy hour, where it's like we send out the speakers, the sponsors, and the attendees, and we end the night with a VIP dinner with these speakers and sponsors to kind of break bread together. So it's like literally a full day experience.
I love it, man. I love it. And so let me ask you this, because see, obviously being a founder, being, you know, kind of a startup, right? That is your niche. That's what you focus on. There's been a lot of people, you know, starting up, and there's a lot of things that everybody's got an idea, right? But there's a lot that goes into it, right? You have to wear 1,000 hats. And so let me ask you this, definitely being on the forefront, being able to speak to hundreds upon hundreds of founders and startups. What are some like 1 or 2 things that, first of all, are big red flags that people are not aware of when they first start something, and that they need to be like focused on is like the priority?
Yeah. So 2 things. The first thing that comes to mind is like, so I think entrepreneurship and being like a startup or a founder right now is put on a pedestal. Everyone thinks that it's like, you know, you can work whatever hours you want, you can make as much money as you want, but in reality, like it's none of that, you know? Like I literally, you know, I laugh at that, because like that's, you know, people are like, that's what gets them excited, is like the money. I'm like, if you're in it for the money, like run, like go get a job, because this is not for you. I think the biggest misconception that I've learned with these early stage founders is like they're visionaries, right? They have these grand big ideas, and that's great and all, right? Like, you know, but not at this moment right now. Right now, you're trying to validate your idea, right? So it's like a lot of founders try to go from 0 to 100 versus 0 to 1. And I think that's where a lot of like startups fail, and a lot of founders get like discouraged or burnt out, because like they have these grand ideas, but they can't even go from 0 to 1. You know, because they're just continuing to, you know, come up with great ideas, potential great ideas, and they never execute on them.
Well, you're exactly right. Because one of the things that I always found very interesting, I was talking to one of my, just a partner of mine, and he was saying, okay, he's got like 7 things that's going on. I said, hey, that's fantastic, but you can only, your attention is divided by those 7 things. When the reality is just focus on 1, or really 2 master ones, get rid of the rest, and then now you can focus 100% of your attention on those things. Because what's interesting is, just like you said, your focus and your attention is the biggest asset that you have. And if you're deploying it into just small incremental things, then guess what? It's just not as effective. And I do think that's a very interesting presupposition or paradigm shift. Now, regarding funding, okay. Angel investor, obviously, you know, just investments, investor, like how do you find that? Where does that come from? And, you know, obviously, what are those hurdles that we should all just anticipate, definitely, you know, starting out?
Yeah, you know, my perception on this has changed a lot, especially as I meet more founders and I get to sit down with some very prominent VCs and angels. So let me start by saying, like, you don't always need to raise money, right? I think raising money, I get also like entrepreneurship is put on a pedestal, and a good example, I like to give examples, because like otherwise, like, you know, I'm a visual learner, so I have to kind of like see it. So I was watching this show that was released by Apple, you know, a while ago, like a couple of years ago. It was called like Planet of the Apps. And basically it was just like, they had like celebrity, like panelists that were like the quote unquote investors, like will.i.am, Jessica Alba. And then, so essentially what this show was like founders would come in and they would pitch their idea, and it's kind of like a Shark Tank, right? But it was like Apple's version of a Shark Tank. So this one specific episode really struck a chord with me, because I was like, damn, like that's crazy. Like it just blew my mind, like how people's perception, you know, are basically like just like wrong essentially on like fundraising. So these 4 startups went up. 3 of them pitched about how much money they raised. One of them like raised $2 million. The other one raised like $500,000. And the crowd was like clapping and everything. And then the last founder went up. He's like, we haven't raised any money, but we've actually made X amount of dollars. And it was like, just shy of $1 million. And people did not clap as much. And I'm just like mind boggled, because I'm like, like it's just crazy to me that, people think that, you can actually raise too much money. And I've talked to 2 founders in general, or they're investors now, that told me basically they raised so much money one time that they got fired from their own company. And like, when you put that into perspective, you're like, holy cow, like that's absolutely wild. Like how do you get fired from your own company? And that's because you gave up too much equity, right? And your board now has control of you. And, that's a very dangerous place. So that's why, from a fundraising perspective, I mean, like there's so many different avenues today. I think something that's new that I'm kind of learning about are these things called rolling funds, which basically, if you want to be an angel investor, for example, like you have to be like a credible investor. And I think like the minimum is like you have to have like $250,000. You have to be making at least $250,000 a year. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's like what the baseline is. And obviously, like an angel investor is just either a very wealthy individual or maybe a founder that just sold their company and have some money to deploy. Usually they work by themselves, or they're in a group called like an angel network that is just a bunch of like angel investors. So that's probably, these angel investors are actually previous founders, most likely. So, those people are not, and I don't want this to sound bad, but like in the sense like VCs, in the sense like it's dangerous because their goal is to like 10x their money, right? Like that's why they're in business. Like, they're not just going to give you money because like out of their, because they want to feel good, right? They're in the business of making money. And if they make a $100,000 investment, they're hoping to get 100x, right? Or at least 10x, is the average that, most investors, most VCs I talk to won't make an investment and they don't think they can make 10x from it. So, the traditional routes are, a venture capital firm going after VCs or angels. But now, the market has opened up. There's so many softwares that have come out, or marketplaces, for example. I think it's called Republic. So Republic basically is a platform where, you or I can go and sign up and put $100 in a company. And basically it's crowdfunding for startups or technology-based businesses. So you have that. You have, obviously grants. Depending on the type of startup or business you have, like you can get government grants or just like local community grants that are available if you qualify for them, as well as like the first place that most people go to are like friends and family. That's usually how most people start that need funding. They get, $5,000 from their mom and dad, or, $10,000 from like a relative. So, there's so many different ways. You just got to understand, like, realize the money is not the issue. There's a lot of money in this world. Like we have a lot of funding. The problem is like people don't realize, what that entails of, right? Because like a lot of people raise money too early and give up too much of their company, and that puts them in trouble later down the road. So I think for me, I'm a true believer. Most of the businesses I've been part of, I've bootstrapped it some shape or form. There is the last startup I was at, we raised about $6 million. So that gave me some insight into like what the VC world really looks like prior to joining Kamp, as well as from like angel investing. And I've made my wife and I, Havana Capital is like our investment arm. So it's her name's Hannah, my name's Javier. So it's like Havana. That's where we get the name from. And so we made a few angel investments. And like for me, I'm an operator at heart. So like I invest in obviously the founder more than like the idea, because like if a founder's hungry, his back is up against the wall, he's gonna figure out a way to make it work, right? It's like, diamonds are made under pressure is the best way I can put it. So I look for those type of founders. But I've also lost money, which sucks, but that's kind of like the game that you're playing. So I hope that answered your question. Sorry, went on a little bit of
Yeah.
a rant there.
No, that's awesome actually, and it kind of like let's pivot a little bit because I like to talk about because a lot of our audience they are at like 1.1 $2 million kind of businesses, right? Structure. So a lot of them aren't at that startup, and a lot of them do a lot of direct response where okay, hey, they put a dollar in and they're making $4, $5, $6 on the back end, so they really don't need a lot of VC or angel investing or like crowdfunding. But however, though, I do find it very interesting because a lot of them are in a situation where they could deploy some of their money effectively into other businesses, right? And so my question to you is, I know you mentioned one service, and I'm somewhat familiar. I've never actually used it myself, which is Republic, which is like a crowdsourced a kind of crowdfunding. That just brings opportunities to you. However, though, I am just curious, where else can you find? I mean, obviously you have your community, which if someone's a listener and they can start engaging with your community and they can basically connect you with other founders that are looking for funding and those opportunities as an angel investor. But how else do you find them? And then secondly, how do you filter them? Like you said, you filter them through more of the individual, more so than the idea. And then as well as what are those metrics? Okay, hey, out of 10 opportunities, is it the 80-20 rule? 20% will produce, but they're big winners.
Yeah, so let me answer that one first. I think the statistic is 73% of all startups fail. So let's start there. Like, it's staggering. It's, like they usually don't make it past their second year. I'm pretty sure it's what like the last time I read about that. So as far as like where to find startups or like, so you have all these crowdfunding platforms. There's Republic, there's this other one called like Seed. They're based out of Austin. I can't remember Seed something, but yeah, if you just Google like, crowdfunding for startups, you're going to get it. I think there's like at least 8 to 10 like solid ones. I've only done a few. I just like did it more as like wanted to play around with it and made like I had $1,000 and deployed it. I wanted to see what that would, how that would work. I come from a growth marketing background. So for me, it's a lot of experimenting. So as far as like, for your audience specifically, obviously, if you're interested in learning more, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to kind of educate you. And, if there's a startup within our community that I can make an introduction, great. I'd love to do that for you. But otherwise, it's one of those things where, you kind of have to come up with your own thesis, right? I mean, like, what are you looking for? Like, are you investing because it's maybe a product that could help one of your family members, or like it makes a positive influence in your life? You got to figure out what the reason why you're investing. Most people, like if you're investing just to make money, I'd recommend like going to a different market, because you usually don't see a return on investment for at least 7 to 10 years. As most companies that IPO or get acquired, it doesn't happen for at least 7 to 10 years. So it's a long-term type of game, right? But there's plenty of other places, that I would recommend, especially if you don't know much about it. For example, Founder Institute is a pre-seed accelerator program that I'm the director here in Dallas for. They're global. They have 200 chapters in about 100 different countries. And essentially we take idea stage entrepreneurs and help them validate their business. So this is at a very early stage. So there's a lot of those around the country. There's like Techstars, Y Combinator. So, depending on where you are in the world, or in the States, just look to see if there's local accelerator programs, because a lot of these accelerator programs are like mentors or people that just had success at, whether it's marketing or sales or whatnot. They can go in as a mentor, but then if they build a relationship, I had plenty of mentors that have built these one-on-one relationships with a lot of the founders that have come through the program that have invested in them, right? Because they believe in the founder, they believe in the idea, but you also got to build that relationship throughout the program. So Accelerator is probably the best place that I would recommend, any of your audience to go check out. And, this is actually, now that you say it, this is a really interesting blog topic that I can probably put together, and I'll send it over to you, so you can share with your audience. But, outside of that, you can go to your angel network groups. I'm pretty sure every at least major city has a type of, like for us, it's like the North Texas Angel Networks, right? So this is just a bunch of angel investors that are, kind of like VCs. They're sourcing deals, right? So they get all these applications of companies that are looking for funding, and they come together, and maybe 10 of these angel investors put $1 million into company X, right? So that's probably like the first 3 to 5 things that I would recommend someone that's looking to somewhat deploy some of their, conscious free capital that they have to spend.
Yeah, and I appreciate you kind of dialing that in, because one of the things that I've discovered is like, even when I'm running into stocks, right? The biggest thing is like, okay, if I have $100,000, instead of deploying $100,000 into one stock, I'd rather do 10 stocks at 10,000 each, right? Then that allows me to kind of have that diversification effect. But also, if there's 2 or 3 of them that are big winners, wonderful, they overcome my losses, because naturally you have to come in with the concept that you will lose, and it's just using resources that I'm willing to lose, right? And that's how I play the game, because then all of a sudden it's not as effective, like, oh my gosh, I got my kids' college to pay for or whatever, right? Because then you can play it logically instead of emotionally, right? And but also when you're working with relational, right? And you deploy capital in companies that are more of just that diamond kind of entrepreneur, right? You can see it, you get it, that makes sense. When you're talking to them, how do you know? Like, do you just do it? Is it intuition, or is it just more of like, okay, hey, you know what? I see something in this person from past experiences, from other data, from other resources, from other people. This guy is an A player, and he's going to do whatever it takes, and I'm going to deploy capital in this company because of that A player.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And this is just coming from like my perspective, neither is it right or wrong, right? So this is just from my perspective and my experience. So for me, being a very analytical person, I look at the data, right? Most of the companies that I tend to invest in or look at, as a potential investment, they talk about like how big their market is, right? They're the so-called, serviceable addressable market, your SAM-TAM, or your total addressable market, and, a lot of, you can, I will say, like, you can sniff out a lot of the BS up early by asking the right questions. So one thing that's a red flag for me that sticks out is like, if a founder doesn't know their numbers, right? Like unit economics. Like, okay, so you're saying you're going to make $1 million, right? Well, how's that $1 million going to come? Like, how many subscriptions are you going to sell? What's your burn rate? So like, there's, those types of questions. That's one way of me kind of filtering it out, right? Anyone that says that they're going to build the next unicorn or billionaire, I scratch out, because I'm just like, that's great and all, but like, everyone else is trying to accomplish that too, right? Like, otherwise you wouldn't really be in business. So that's a no-no, a big no-no for me. What I've been experiencing a lot right now is I've been coaching a lot of like the startups that I'm working with over at Founder Institute. Like, I think we are normalizing like cold emailing, especially like with like, if you don't know someone and you don't have someone that can make a warm intro. So like when you're reaching out to VCs or angels, like a lot of us just went in for the hard sell. It's telling, like, hey, we need X amount of dollars. Build a relationship. Like, like we're human beings, more than anything, right? It's just like, great. I want to invest in a human, not a company or product or service. So just really humanize that relationship and just make sure it's mutually beneficial, right? Because at the end of the day, like, that's why we're both doing this, right? Because I want to invest in you and give back. And, in return, I want you to succeed and make me a lot of money. So really the data is the biggest thing for me. Is I look at the data, again, the unit economics, what they're looking to deploy that capital. Because like, for example, I could get in trouble for saying this, but so like the WeWorks of the world, the Ubers of the world, I can't think of, I can think of a lot, but so I like to call them watermelon companies. So you're like, watermelon companies. So watermelon company is, they are green on the outside. So they get a bunch of VC funding, right? And a bunch of money from like, institutional investors and whatnot. But in the inside, they're red. Like, they're not making, I'm pretty sure I think it was 2020, Uber lost $3 billion in like Q3 or Q4. I don't remember which one it was. Like how do you lose that much money and still be $1 billion company, right? That goes back to like the fundraising is just kind of, our perception of fundraising is in the wrong places, right? So I think overall, just like for me, and what I recommend is like, look at the data, make sure just the numbers make sense. I mean, most of your audience are business owners. I mean, like you said, as a marketer myself, if I put $1 in, I want to know that I can, make $7 or $10, right? So like same concept applies to like investing startups. You're just kind of putting a little bit more capital than what you would be doing in a campaign or like a marketing initiative. So yeah, look at the data. And if you don't know, don't be afraid to ask, right? I mean, like, I feel like for the most part, like the angel and VC community is very, like, go on Twitter. Like Twitter has been like my playground recently, like for the last year or so, ever since joining Kamp. Like I was never really on Twitter, but you can find so many things on Twitter. It's very casual, just like join a conversation, right? And just like ask questions there. Like people want to help, I think we're kind of shifting into like, let's all compete, but it's not about building the tallest building and tearing everyone down. It's about helping everyone, come up, and then you come up even higher because, you're elevating your game to the next level. I think is kind of where I'm seeing the business world and kind of shifting to, not the traditional like Mad Men, like, it's, you're either first or last type of vibe.
Well, it's very interesting because I think that has a lot to do with just kind of culture now, right? Millennials versus kind of what a lot of influencers are talking about regarding empathy and things like that. But also, I love that approach because relational. I think there's a statistic in B2B world. There, like almost 81% of the sales are through referrals, which is basically network, right?
Yeah.
Relationships, things like that. So when you have that kind of concept, it's like, well, shoot, man. That's how you really kind of be able to figure out. Now, let me ask you this, okay? You have, let's say, for example, you deploy capital, 10 companies, 10 opportunities, right? And let's say, for example, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 of them don't produce, okay? At what point do you pull your money and say, hey, you know what, maybe this opportunity, or do you just keep funding it, right? It's that kind of logic, like, okay, do you see the vision? But there's also that emotional, which is stupidity, right? And so you want to make sure you don't miss out on an opportunity, but you also don't want to be flooding money and capital into something that isn't ever going to produce. But also, I do understand it has to be a long-term scale sometimes, and it depends upon what the time scale looks like. So I'd love to get your response on that.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, and thank you for asking that. So I think overall, all right, so the first thing, let me say this, is like if you invest in startups, don't expect to get your money back. Like it's not like buying stocks or crypto. Like if you invest in a startup, like that money is being utilized most likely very quickly, because like the lifespan of a startup is, it's very short depending on how much, how successful they are. So if you are wanting to invest in startups, just know that like most of the ways when you invest in a startup is one of different ways. You either invest like straight up equity. So like you invest and you get X amount of equity, right? Or there's the new thing is called a SAFE, which is a convertible note. So essentially what that means, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so like don't take any legal advice from me, but a SAFE essentially is, Christian, you have, a startup, and I'm going to give you $10,000. In exchange, you're going to give me a 20% discount whenever you go to raise basically when you finish raising your first round. So your first round, you're looking to, raise $100,000 or $100,000, let's just say. So what that means is basically that by you investing early, right? It also depends at what stage you're investing. The earlier, the more equity you get, right? But it's also a lot bigger risk. So you get basically a discount. So like instead of paying $1 per share per se, you're paying 80 cents per share. So you get a discount. So it's called a SAFE convertible note. And that's as much as I'll talk about that, because otherwise it's just going to be a rabbit hole. But look into that. That's most of early stage startups. That's how they're raising money, is through SAFEs. Y Combinator is the one that kind of started that. As far as like, your question in regards to like, do you continue to invest, or, you can't really pull your money out. So like you're kind of shit out of luck. So I like to say that I consider myself a broke angel. And I'm like, well, what do I mean by that? Well, I don't really have a lot of money to spend, but I have the network and the resource to connect you to, right? Because being an angel, like an investor, doesn't only have to be like a capital investor, right? You can make introductions to key people, right? Or you can have certain resources that can help a certain startup. So back to the relationship game, I think that's very important, more than anything. So I would depending on every situation is different, right? But I would just really look at where it's like one red flag for me of whether I continue to invest or not and get more money is, are other people giving them money, right? Because if other people are not giving them money, why should I give them money, right? Because like obviously that should throw up some yellow or red flags for you. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say, and that's a tough one. I've never been asked this. I just, for me, I'm someone, again, I'm an operator, so I like to get in the trenches with these founders, and that's helped me a lot because I can understand the business a lot better. So, I basically we try and figure out other ways. Maybe they have to change their pricing, their revenue model. Maybe they have to find alternative funding routes like a grant or, crowdfunding. Which could be a little bit more costly to the founder later on, but like at that point, like you need cash to survive, right? So that's probably what I would, recommend. It really just depends on like the specific situation because every situation is different, right? That potential investment that you make could be the tipping point for them where they just like take off, right? So, you never know, but just know it's kind of like, you probably have a little bit better odds than going to Vegas, investing in a startup. Maybe not, depending on your luck. I don't have luck when I go to Vegas. My wife does. So yeah, I just think it just really depends. Like, do you believe in the idea? Do you believe in the founder? And, at the end of the day, like for me, it's just like, how are you putting my capital to work for you, right? Because like now that I say that, I thought of another thing. Maybe look at the finances, right? If they raise X amount of dollars and you realize that they spent X amount of dollars on like business development, right? Well, what did they develop? Or if they put it into these marketing initiatives, right? Like if they got all these users, but these users are not paying, like obviously that's not the correct audience, or customer for them. So, just again, looking at the numbers, the data tells it all, right? I think the numbers never lie. So those are probably, for me personally, the first 2 or 3 things that I would look at just to make sure that, if I want to continue investing. Otherwise, I kind of just step back and act more of like a resource and advisor to the startup, right? Because he still has my money, right? So my best interest is in them winning. I'm not going to let him lose. That's one thing. It's just like, I won't let you lose. Like I'll die on the field with you if I have to.
Yeah, that's just comes with relationship, right? Which is what your basic point is throughout the whole process. It's like, hey, if this person all of a sudden stops taking your phone calls and you gave them $10, $50, $100,000, whatever, then obviously there's a red flag right there. However, though, if they are the first ones to give you a call and notify you proactively and say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what needs to be done. These are our, KPIs. Hey, we need more assistance. We need some revenue. I respect that more so than someone that just hides from obviously the truth of things. So, and again, I have not deployed a lot of capital in venture, any other startups or anything like that. I deploy a lot of my capital in stocks and real estate and stuff like that and my own business. So, again, I appreciate you being on here talking about this, having this community, this amazing community that you've been able to establish with your business partner. And but what I like to do, man, is obviously kind of have my audience reach out to you, kind of be in that community. I know you're having 2 amazing live events, the 23rd of April and May 7th as well. I think one is in Miami and another one on May 7th is Orange County. Is that correct? How can they reach out to you and be part of this community, man?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're wanting to attend the event, let me know. I can probably hook you up with a ticket. For Miami, campevents.com/Miami -April. And then for the Orange County, just campevents.com/OC. I'll send those over to you so you can share with them. Or you can your guy can do the marketing thing and, drop him in the video, click the link below. So go to our website, campevents.com. That's where we have all our events. Otherwise, we actually just launched, I told it, back to like, I'm a growth marketer at heart. So I'm constantly trying to find ways to like, tap into a new user base. So I told our founder, Phil, I was like, yo, like we need to, if we really like, what COVID has made me realize is like, we're not going back to like what we used to live, we're never going back to that world of like going to work every single day to an office, you know, from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, whatever. Like we are living in a virtual, we're going to be living in a hybrid world now where maybe 2 days you work at home and 3 days you work, you know, at your office. Point being that I was like, we need to build an online community, right? Because what did we all crave while COVID was happening? Like relationships, like community, you know, finding your tribe is what it comes down to. So I was like, yo, like, let's try this Slack. I think we should launch a Slack group or channel, you know, and obviously like we'll have like the general and, you know, we'll have one for like all the sponsors and the speakers, and then maybe talk about fundraising. So we have this Slack channel that basically has or Slack group that has different channels that, you know, whether you're looking for a co-founder, you have part-time or full-time jobs, if you just have general questions about what it takes to, you know, launch a startup. If you have questions for like VCs, angel investors, like we're building this little community. It's been probably about, I don't know, like 2 months since we've launched it. And like, I mean, these are not staggering numbers, but like we have like 257 people that are like active every single day. And like, that's really cool because like, this was just like an idea that I had. I'm just like, and it actually helped some people raise money and like find business partners. So I thought that was even cooler more than anything. So we have this Slack channel that if you're interested to learn more about like either investments or our community, or you just want to get tapped into like some of our founders or startup, it's probably the best place for you to go and hang out, you know? So I'll send you that link as well. But yeah, so those are probably the two best places to go. Depending on the city, it's usually like campevents.com/the city, or our Slack channel or Twitter. Awesome. We're very active on Twitter, like way too active. And then one other thing that I like to mention about that is, so during COVID, we came up with this idea. I don't know if you were into the whole Clubhouse thing when it was like really big. Like I haven't been on Clubhouse in like months now, but like sometimes I would fall asleep like on Clubhouse. My wife would be like, "What are you doing?" You know, I'm just like, I don't know, I'm just like joining a conversation at like 3:30 in the morning. But we have this thing called Wind Down Wednesdays. So essentially, what this is like we'll bring a very prominent like VC or founder. Our last founder we had was David Sachs, who was one of the PayPal mafia guys. So he was one of the founders with Elon Musk. So I mean, we've had I mean, some heavy hitters on there, and it's really cool because it's like a fireside chat for the first hour, and then like the last 30 minutes, like you can go up there and either ask questions about, you know, being a VC, or if you're a startup founder, you can go up there and pitch to them. So it's just really cool. So that's another place that we hang out. We do that about once a month. Our next one's coming up May 4th, the week of when we're going to be in Orange County, and we have the founder of Tweet Stocks, I think it's called, or Tweetbots. He sold for like, I don't know. I did the math. I think he made like $200 million based on like what he sold. So like this guy is like very, very successful. So yeah, if you want to hang out and have a good conversation, listen to like how, you know, to deploy your capital and what to do, what he looks for, you know, just come join the conversation with us on Clubhouse.
Awesome, guys. And those links will be in the description below, so you can obviously engage with his community and stuff. And I actually joined you guys' Slack community just before you joined here today. And I was just looking at some of the things. I was like, oh, this is really cool. So I'm definitely going to be engaging with that more. So guys, I would highly recommend it because, again, it's just building a network, right? All the connections, all the opportunities, everything like that, it happens behind doors, right? And those are the best opportunities right there. And so I would highly recommend just being engaged with this community. It's remarkable, and the massive exponential growth that you guys are having. Now, before we let you go, just thank you for obviously your journey, just being authentic with kind of your story, and obviously being able to, you know, share kind of just a massive insight with, you know, startups, building structure, process, how to look at opportunities and how to structure it and how to have the right mindset behind it. But before we let you go, is there any last words you'd like to share with our audience, my man?
Yeah, so I actually was doing a podcast yesterday with one of our speakers from Kamp. And he asked me this question that's no one's ever asked me before. And I was just like, I honestly like clapped at it. And so I made a tweet about it. So he was like, if you had a blank billboard, like what would you put on it and why? And I was like, I was taken back by it. I was like, okay, damn. Okay. So I literally said, like my whole mentality lately, like has been like, just shoot your shot. And I know that's like very cliche, but here's some examples. The Phil example, like I literally read an article about him and hosting events. Now I'm traveling across the country hosting these events, right? Founder Institute, I read it on a publication that they were bringing a chapter to Dallas. I figured out who was running it. I sent them a DM. I was like, hey, how do I get involved? Now I'm running the Accelerator program. So it's just like, honestly, like a lot of people are scared to ask. And there's ways of doing it, right? Like be aggressive and salesy, and that's probably not going to work out too well for you. But if you're actually like empathetic, if people can know when you're trying to be sleazy or not, right? I mean, especially on LinkedIn, like, if you literally add me on LinkedIn and try and sell me on the first message, I'm just like, delete. I'm just like, I don't know who you are. Like, how am I supposed to trust you? Like, so just shoot your shot. The worst thing they can say is no or not respond. So what? Just move on.
There you go, guys. And that is Javy Martinez. Man, I appreciate you jumping on, guy, and just the incredible amount of immense value. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. And remember, be uncommon if you can.
Hey, stop. This is Christian D. Evans, host of Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. And I just want to say personally, thank you for listening to our podcast. And, if you love what you're hearing right now, please, like this, share this, and show some love to our guest, and write a review, and, share this with your friend, your family, someone that truly needs it, because at the end of the day, you can make an impact in that person's life by sharing their story with that individual. And again, if you're a new guest, welcome to our community. We're so excited. We're so just honored. And secondly, if you're a returning guest, hey, we appreciate the love. Thank you. Share this with your friend and family. And guys, remember, be uncommon if you can.